case you didn't know, there's an industry out there targeting Alzheimer's patients to remove them from their families one way or another to make money off of them as they're still alive, but their brains are really going. And so they can take a lot of advantage of that person and hide them somewhere and just continue to make a lot of money, right? There's a corrupt industry. So what's happening, though, is now the relatives are in on the corruption, where they don't want that money that they just got selling their half-sister's condo for $460,000. They don't want that money to end up in the hands of these facilities that many of them really are very, very bad no matter how much you're paying. They don't really take good care. And so I think that there's a revolution going on of relatives who get to are their attorney in fact, and have total control over the finances, and who choose not to put these people in facilities. And maybe it was even the Alzheimer's patient when they were well who their instructions were that put me somewhere, when I get bad enough, put me in a place where I will die quickly. Okay? So I'm thinking that at first I thought maybe my Aunt Sandy, there was a vendetta between the two, and she just, got rid of my mother within a couple months that she moved her to Florida, and didn't put her in a facility, and she didn't really care that she's going to die soon. I'm thinking that maybe my mother gave her permission when she got bad enough in her advanced Alzheimer's, development, that she didn't want to live like that. And I think there's a possibility that she had my Aunt Sandy, my half-Aunt Sandy, put her in an apartment to die. Because I just found out that it's illegal in certain states for you to dump a relative at their request at an apartment complex. That it's not illegal because it's illegal for these apartment complexes to deny them rental. You can't turn them away if they're handicapped in any way. So you can, people can just dump these Alzheimer's patients instead of paying $7,000 to $10,000 a month. They can dump them in these apartments, have them watched over a little bit, and maybe gradually, removing their water supply or, whatever, not feeding them. Just like they do in the facilities many times. They don't take good care of them. And they don't want to go through a lawsuit or anything. So what they do is they just decide, I'm going to take this and not give it $10,000 a month to these facilities, and I'm just going to do what she asked. Her request was not to allow her to just go into one of these facilities and die that way, neglected. So I think what happened actually now was my Aunt Sandy did not put her in a facility. She was in her mobile home for a few months, I know for sure, but then she dropped off from being there in the public records address system. So mid-2022, it looked like my mother had been moved somewhere. And I just assumed that Sandy put her in some senior home or, for Alzheimer's patients. I just assumed that. But after a while, I kept checking to make sure that my mother had no address anymore, and I thought she was in a facility. But then the other day, I looked up on Spokio where if anything changed, because I noticed my Aunt Sandy moved from that mobile home. So I wanted to find out, what was going on. And so my mother showed up living in Oklahoma, having left that place in Lake Placid, Florida. It showed that my mother moved to Spokio, and then my Aunt Sandy moved to another place in Lake Placid. So she stayed in Lake Placid, but my mother shows living in Oklahoma. in an apartment complex. So I got to thinking that what if this is true? I did call the Garden Complex there in Oklahoma, and he's some new guy said, yeah, I have to look into whether your mother was here or not. In 2023, I wasn't here, and we have to check to see if there's a fraud you were mentioning, that maybe someone took her social security number to use to rent there, because we have government audits every year to see if we're following the tax codes. So he wanted to know if my mother was there, number one, or whether or not it was a fraud, because it's hard to get an Alzheimer's patient to move like that. I'm talking about fraudulently, and I was just thinking someone must have her social security number or whatever, who gave it to the apartment building fraudulently. So I'm still waiting to hear from this guy. I want to know what happened, if my mother was really there and died in 2023, was dumped there to die. It was my feeling that my mother died in 2023. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that it makes sense that there's a kind of like rebellion of relatives who don't want to give their money to these $10,000 a month facilities that don't do a very good job. They're not regulated very well. And they don't want to go through the process of suing them for negligence. And so what they do is, instead of forking out the trust money that they have after selling a house on behalf of this person, they just decide, I'm not going to put them in this facility to rot. Am I having to sue them or anything? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep this money. I'm not going to pay for a facility. And when the time is right, I'm going to dump this person, my relative, my distant relative, half-sister. I'm going to dump her in an apartment where she's allowed to be with a disability, and then just slowly allow her to die there. Maybe restrict her food intake, maybe restrict her water intake. So it's kind of like a murder. It's kind of like a negligence thing that they could get them for if they wanted to go after her. They don't have to have an autopsy because she's an Alzheimer's, documented, certified Alzheimer's, advanced Alzheimer's. And, the relative knows this. Sandy knows this, that she doesn't have to give her an autopsy. She can just have her sent to some funeral place and then cremated after that. There's not going to be any inquiry into it because she's Alzheimer's. I'm just saying that Alzheimer's patients have a real vulnerability, that unless your family's willing to take care of you every day in their house, you'd have to have a strong bond to want to do that, because it's really not very pleasant to deal with the toiletries and stuff like that. And feeding them, it's really miserable to take care of someone like. So, sure, you would save money doing that by not forking it out to a facility, but then you realize this is really detrimental for me to take care of this person every day and have to deal with going to the bathroom and things like that, and not wanting to have to watch her die and suffer. It makes total sense that certain people who don't have the ability to take care of somebody on that level is just going to dump her in an apartment complex, a cheap apartment complex, and let her die there with maybe very, very little visitation of somebody you hire just to check on her to see if she's still alive. It makes perfect sense that could happen. It's sad, but true. I mean, these Alzheimer's patients don't know who they are. No, they don't recognize you. They get scared. I once visited a friend's mother when she was dying of Alzheimer's in Southern California, and she was afraid of me, because she didn't recognize me. She still knew her son was taking care of her. She wasn't that bad off, but they get scared and they freak out and they flip out because they're strangers with their son. You don't know the behaviors that happen from this. It can get really bad. So I just really think that Sandy thought she couldn't take care of my mother anymore in the condition she was in, and she didn't want her to die on her property, so she just had her dropped off at an apartment complex in Oklahoma. But I'm still waiting on the confirmation. Still waiting. So in a way, I thought at first maybe Sandy had a vendetta against my mother and just wanted the money. and maybe just had her killed off or something. But then I'm just starting to think the other way. You know, my mother would have been abused and neglected in one of these, facilities, no matter which one it was. And that's a lot of money down the drain for an older person to lose, like my Aunt Sandy. It's a lot of money to lose. And you know that these facilities do not take good care unless you have to visit them all the time to make sure your relatives safe and sound. And I understand why there may be some kind of way for relatives to get their Alzheimer's relatives out of their situation as quick as possible. And it may not be just be greed. It may be that it makes sense not to throw away money on these horrible facilities that want $10,000 a month. It's ridiculous. So I think Sandy was smart if she didn't, want my mother in one of those facilities. But I just, I'm horrified that, the process of my mother's dying prematurely when she still had a lifespan left in her situation. She just needed someone to take care of her. But it's easy to see how horrible that is to witness, of just keeping someone alive who died already. Because a lot of these Alzheimer's patients are considered dead already, that they left their bodies spiritually and their bodies left behind still living without a brain. So that's kind of horrific for someone to witness. So I guess you can understand what's happening with these Alzheimer's people. They're very vulnerable. And, it's not like taking care of your husband who you know. It's like some distant relative willing to sell your house for you and pick you up and bring you to her mobile home, and then deciding, I can't take care of this person anymore within a few months. And then deciding, okay, I'm going to put her in this apartment, that cheap apartment, and maybe have her visited once in a while to see how she's going until she dies, with no supervision there. And so I think that's a possibility, and that no one's going to accuse you of murdering her in that situation because she's already kind of dead as an Alzheimer's patient. No one's going to